So hello, welcome to our speakers and all of our participants from around the world. My name is Ellie Finkelstein, and I am a campaigner and news editor at Freedom United. We are the world's largest community against all forms of modern slavery globally, raising awareness and turning that awareness into action and building power for change for a world resilient to modern slavery. We chose this topic, the true cost of the Games, at a crucial time ahead of the closing ceremony of the Olympics this weekend. In hosting the Olympic Games, French authorities have undertaken what's been described as a social cleansing effort that has profoundly impacted migrants, asylum seekers, homeless individuals, and sex workers. With a heavy-handed repression-first approach, the French police have targeted these people, prioritizing the city's image over the well-being of its residents. This tactic, veiled under anti-trafficking narratives, has, in reality, led to increased vulnerability to exploitation and danger for those already at risk. The persistent myth of a rise in prostitution during major sporting events has justified these harmful measures, despite evidence to the contrary. The conflation of sex work and trafficking has further exacerbated this situation, and consequently increased documentation checks and intensified police operations that not only push sex workers into more dangerous hidden conditions, but anyone with precarious statuses, thus heightening risks of exploitation and violence. Over the past 14 months, more than 13,000 people have been forcibly relocated. As we delve into these issues, our aim is to cut through the rhetoric around major sporting events and trafficking and understanding the real impact of these occasions on the marginalized communities. With the FIFA World Cup to be held in the US, Canada, and Mexico in 2026, and the next stop for the Olympic Summer Games in 2028 in LA, we hope to shine a light on the truth of what occurs around such mega events and ensure that the spirit of unity and fairness extends beyond just the stadiums, but to every corner of every city that they take place. So welcome, and thank you for joining us at this critical time in this important conversation. I will pass it off to Joanna.
Hello, everyone. My name's Joanna Hewitt-James. I'm the Executive Director of Freedom United. I'm delighted to be here today for this event on a very topical issue. So the way we'll do this is we're going to have a conversation first after we've done a quick poll. Then the poll will just show on your screen. You can participate, and then we'll share the results of the poll in the chat. So do feel free to make good use of the chat. But if during the event, if you have questions, there's a Q&A button you'll see, and beneath our images are photos, and that's the best place to post your questions. The panel discussion will last for about half an hour, and then we'll have a good amount of time, a good 20 minutes or so for questions and answers. So if you didn't send your question ahead of time, there's still plenty of time to send it now. And we'll also be inviting you to present your question if you would like to during the event. If you would like to, we would very much encourage you to post on social, and please use the hashtag TrueCostParis2024. We'll put that in the chat as well for ease of reference, and also our handle, which is @Freedom United HQ. So to get started, I'd like to introduce my two panelists for today's discussion. They are on the screen. We have Roxane Ouadghiri Hassani. Roxane is a Deputy Director of CCEM, which is the Comité Contre l'Esclavage Moderne, which translates into English as the Committee Against Modern Slavery. It is the pioneer French NGO on the topic of human trafficking for labor exploitation. And we also have with us today PG Macioti. PG is a program coordinator at Médecins du Monde, France, where she leads the Jasmine Project, which is a project aiming at ending violence against sex workers. And her research spans international migration and trafficking in various locations around the world. Now, both these organizations are members of the coalition Le Revers de la Médaille, which translates as the other side of the medal, This is a coalition to warn of the social impact of the organization of the Olympic and Paralympic Games in Paris, and to plead for a positive legacy in the fight against exclusion. So you should see shortly on your screen a question, which is, do major sporting events inherently cause an increase in trafficking? And we're going to put that question at the beginning right now and also at the end. So the idea is to really, do they inherently cause an increase in trafficking? So in your understanding, do you believe that when people all come together for major sporting events, do they inherently cause an increase in human trafficking for exploitation? So we'll leave that there for a short moment as we start the discussion. And then also post in the chat, I think, for everyone, the hashtag and our handle, which is Freedom United HQ. Then I also will ask as well my colleague to post the names of the organizations that are represented by two speakers. Great. Okay, so I'll kick off with my first question, which is the big events like this, like the Olympics, they often elicit speculation that they create a breeding ground for labor and sex trafficking because they attract so many tourists, outsiders, and money-making opportunities. For example, the organization Bridging Freedom, which is just one, says that human trafficking at the Super Bowl in the US is a prime target for traffickers because it attracts a large number of people. But what does your experience in Paris tell you about how true it is that traffickers descend upon events like this, or that exploiters descend upon events like this? In a short yes or no, literally just a quick minute, just want to get an idea of whether you've seen any indication of a spike in cases due to the event. And I'm going to first turn to PG to answer that question.
Yes, so I'm going to speak to trafficking for the purpose of exploitation in the sex industry, and it's a clear no. If you want me to elaborate, I'll do it later, but it's definitely a myth. In Paris and in all other major sportive events around the globe, it is a big myth.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we'll certainly get into the depths of why that is the case, but that first very, very decisive answer is clear. What about on the topic of labor exploitation, Roxane, knowing how much business and activity happens in the run-up to the Olympics?
Thank you, Joanna. My answer will be a bit longer, but I will try to make it short still. So obviously, when we talk about labor exploitation and big sport events, the first thing that comes to mind is the construction of the sites. So for example, stadium, dormitories, facilities such as. And I think we all have in mind the sad example of the last Soccer Cup in Qatar. However, the CCM, our organization, tried to raise awareness and to alert regarding potential exploitation during the Olympics as well. So, for example, in sectors such as site security, cleaning, laundry, garbage collection, Airbnb cleaning, etc. But also the arrival of wealthy tourists coming with exploited domestic staff, maybe those tourists can also be diplomats, and their staff may be running away, taking the advantage of being in France to run away. So those are all the risks that we identified directly coming from the Olympics. However, at the moment, we were aware of only one case directly linked to the Olympics and to the construction of facilities. It was revealed by the labor inspection 2 years ago. It's still under prosecution. And our contact at the labor exploitation clearly and repeatedly told us that because those sites are under such scrutiny, it is very, very unlikely to find more human trafficking cases.
Thank you. I think it's so great for us to have the opportunity to hear the different experiences of labor exploitation and also sex exploitation in the context of trafficking. So thank you for sharing your experience. So my next question is going to stick with the same organization, Bridging Freedom, but they're not alone in their opinion. They say that trafficking at major sporting events requires a coordinated effort from law enforcement, non-profit organizations, and the public. However, we've heard reports that we've talked about in our blog post, and that Ellie has written about in emails to our supporters, that authorities in Paris, in particular law enforcement, have been engaged in what can only be described as a social cleansing effort ahead of the Games. What can you tell us about this, and what does your experience tell you about the role of law enforcement in human trafficking? So that question I'd like to put to you, Roxane, to really hear a bit about the role of the authorities in Paris in tackling or exacerbating trafficking.
Sure. So I think that in theory, Bridging Freedom is right. In theory, I mean, we should all be working together. The question is to what purpose and to what end? So we, as a CCM, again, we have always been advocating that human trafficking is not only the result of, let's say, mean or violent individuals. It is also the result of structural and societal factors that will worsen the vulnerability of some people. So I will try to explain this a bit, but for example, I think a lot of you know that in the international and French definition of human trafficking, the fact of housing the victim is one of the actions that an exploiter, a trafficker, will employ to commit human trafficking, whatever the purpose. In 2023, the promise of housing was part of the initial promise made to 74% of all the victims that we assisted. And there are 304 victims that we assisted last year. So we clearly see that vulnerable people, and among them, especially homeless individuals, are particularly at risk of recruitment for the purpose of labor exploitation. No later than yesterday, we just identified a woman who was sleeping in the staircase of some building she was able to enter because she had no roof. And she met there a woman who told her, "Why are you sleeping here? You can come to my place. And if you just work 1 or 2 hours a day, I will accommodate you for everything." You can imagine that it was a false promise and that now she's really extremely exploited over her. So why is this linked to the Olympics? Because in France, our emergency shelter system is insufficient, first of all, for all the people who may need sheltering. And also because until recently, a big proportion of this system relied on cheap hostels establishing contracts with the state to provide for emergency shelter. So the state would pay those hostels who are not very good hotels, so they actually don't have reservation from tourists, etc., to provide shelter to a woman victim of violences, asylum seekers, etc. So it was already not optional, but in prevision of the Olympics, a lot of those hotels, they broke up the contract they had with the state to renovate and to take tourist reservation and make more money than what they would do with the state. So according to the other side of the medal, last year, 1,500 beds disappeared from the national sheltering, no, not the national system, but only the Parisian sheltering system, which is huge. So our fear at CCM is that the more people will be unable to access this system because of the Olympics now, but we really doubt that those beds will reintegrate the sheltering system. Our fear is that more people will be exposed to the risk of exploitation. So it's more an indirect link to the Olympics. So as NGOs, I think it's the same for PG's organization, but yes, we do question the way law enforcement has been ordered to secure and tidy up the main concerned neighborhoods here in Paris and near Paris. Of course, there is this question of social cleansing with squats, camps being really cleaned and disappearing overnight. But there are also less visible consequences. For example, at the beginning of June, some police officer told us, you should hurry up filling the complaint with the victim you are talking to me about, because starting mid-June, we won't have the time to take any complaint on trafficking because of the game. So if all the police officers are here in Paris working for the game and just, doing maybe purposeless security and securization, who is leading ongoing cases, who is investigating real human trafficking, and who is here for the victims who want to report to the police. And finally, we do not have any elements to back this, but we fear that the intense presence of police officers in the street, in public transportation, in shops, and even, on television, will be an additional mean of coercion for the exploiters, who already are telling all day long to the victims, you should not go outside. If the police find you, they will put you in prison. They will send you back to your country. So you have no other choice than to work for me all day and to stay at home, etc.
Thank you, Roxane. I think it's fascinating and something that we don't think about, of the indirect consequences, and hearing about how there's been a reduction in the provision of care, a provision that's no doubt been hard fought for, and to hear your concerns about the fact that that may not actually be temporary, as may have been presented, and what that might mean for future care. And hearing that combined with what's a potential increase in risk is very concerning. And I think that really presents an angle that we often may not think about when cities are hosting major sporting events like this. I'd like to turn to PG to answer on this question of the role of the authorities in Paris tackling versus exacerbating trafficking.
Yes, thank you, Roxane. I will start from the end by saying what repressive measures have been taken, and I will link this to my answer to the previous question, to the fact that it's a myth that big sporting events will produce necessarily more clients for sex workers, for more clients for the sex industry, and therefore more trafficking in the sex industry. This is a myth, and it's a myth that has been invented, clearly invented. The numbers have been invented by organizations that fight against prostitution, against rights to sex workers, in the name of fighting against trafficking in the sex industry. And this has been proven, it has been debunked, this myth. It has been even admitted by such organizations, like in the 2006 World Cup in Germany. An organization, Coalition Against Trafficking as Women, had invented the cipher of 40,000 women being trafficked into Germany for the purpose of the games, of the football World Cup. But it still gets reused and reused because it serves the purpose of social cleansing, of control, and of policing of the sex industry. And even in contexts where supposedly we have here in France a law that should be protecting victims, seeing all sex workers as victims of trafficking without distinguishing from any, they're all victims according to the French law. But what we see in reality on the ground is policing, is controls, masked with other types of how do you call it, of laws at local level, such as we are not allowed to work from vans, which is the way the sex workers work. So they go there and kick them out, not in the name of anti-prostitution, but in the name of you need to leave because you're not allowed to work in vans, whereas a van offering other type of work, selling something, is not going to be targeted by these controls. We have seen in the run-up to the Olympics, in the name of protecting sex workers, actually, and increased migration controls in the parks where sex workers work and do street work. Most of them are migrants from Nigeria and from the South America, in the two biggest parks in Paris. We have seen it in the center of Paris, in districts such as Belleville, where Chinese sex workers work. There have been an increase in police controls. There have been more issues of deportations, issues of tickets to have to leave the country. There has been, therefore, the sex workers have been pushed to work more and more into the night, and support organizations, outreach organizations have had trouble being able to contact the workers. So there has actually been really an effort to kick people out of sight in order to present the city as a proper moral city that fights against exploitation in the sex industry, regardless of the fact that police was not at all working to protect anyone. And one example of this is the fact that while there is an increased amount of violence against sex workers since this law to protect them has been put in place, and that we've been recording the violence and its increase over the years, sex workers are less and less keen to report, because at the same time police keeps going after them. And this is true because of other laws that are there, that are the laws, anti-pimping laws, which actually target more sex workers than they target real pimps, because pimps are not just the figure of the trafficker that we all have in mind, but pimps for the French law, and I've seen this question in the chat, so I'm just answering it as we go along. Pimping can be just working together, aiding each other to work. Pimping can be, and we've been speaking about housing, pimping can be a landlord who gets its rent paid by a sex worker. And we've seen this in the run-up to the Olympics. What has the state done? Instead of collaborating, and this is the first part of the question, collaborating in order with organization, with people working on the ground to understand what can be done to help potential victims of trafficking, instead of helping by putting information leaflets on information on how to get help in hotels, in Airbnbs. No, what have they done? Have struck a deal with Airbnbs to report instantly if they think that somebody in their Airbnb is doing sex work, which is going to harm first and foremost the workers who are, or the people who are, even if they're forced, selling sex services in those premises. Because as we were seeing with Roxane, people are scared of the police, and they are told by the traffickers, even if they are not willingly there, that they have to be scared by the police. So what's actually happening since the beginning of the organization of the Olympics has been repression, social cleansing, pushing sex workers more to the margins, and not at all trying to work with organizations in order to find ways to protect people who are potentially being exploited.
Thank you, PG. I think it's really enlightening to hear about how policies actually restrict. It sounds like what you're saying is that they make it more difficult for people to be able to go about the work they do in safety, if I'm not mistaken. Perhaps you could tell me a little bit about what that really means for example, if workers feel like they are facing risks, or they see other people who may be like colleagues or friends who they feel might be at risk, when you've got the kind of policies and rules that you've described, where even Airbnb hosts are being brought into regulation and enforcement, what does that mean for how we can better protect ourselves? I think really it sounds like there's a lot of myths around trafficking and sporting events, and how important is it that we squash these, and what the kind of changes we need to see so that people are actually protected from being made vulnerable ahead of events like this.
May I answer directly?
Yes, please.
Sorry. You raised a very, very important point, which is the fact that certain laws that are anti-prostitution or anti-trafficking actually prevent potential helpers of people who can potentially support their colleagues or their friends or people coming to their premises to live, to report, because they are made instantly into criminals themselves. So, for instance, the deal with Airbnb, it was that the Airbnb would want to strike this deal in order not to be seen as potentially contributing or taking profit out of trafficking, especially in the sex industry, or taking any profit from prostitution. And whereas what we organizations that work on the ground say is that even clients are often the only people that are in touch with sex workers who are exploited. And there have been uncountable examples. I am an academic, a scholar in the research on sex work and trafficking and the links between sex work and trafficking and migration. And this has been really something I've interviewed over 200 sex workers worldwide. And that has often been the case, that a client was the link to come out, to run away. And this is now absolutely impossible, in unvisible under the French law. So mostly making a colleague vulnerable to be criminalized as a pimp for working together with you for safety. This affects any sex worker, whether people are selling sex because of circumstances, because of lack of options, or because of choice, or whatever they would name it, or because of exploitation. If you work together with another worker, you are safer. And this is made illegal by this law, that by the anti-pimping law. So imagine how you would not be able to say, oh, I was working with this other woman and I think she's trafficked. Can you help her? No, because you're basically declaring that you have committed a crime. So yes, it has very large repercussions, and it's interesting to look into detail of what it means, the criminalization of third parties, as it's called as well.
Yeah. No, I think that's super interesting, and was my concern when I heard you speaking. For this third question, I'd like to turn to Roxane and hear from you about whether you feel there are a lot of myths around trafficking and sporting events, and how important it is that we squash them, and the kind of actions you'd like to see to better protect people from being made vulnerable.
Yes, I think it's a very good thing that everyone, the more we were close to the games, everyone got together and reflect on the potential risks regarding trafficking. And I think it's a good thing to have those risks in mind. Now we have to look at the figures. And I think it is what my colleague kind of said. It's that all the studies that have been done around the major sport events cannot allow us to say that there is a direct link between demand and exploitation for all forms of exploitation. So we have to be cautious, and I think this is also why I like the title of this seminar, because we want to protect, but at what cost, and are we actually protecting, etc. Also, maybe I can talk a bit about what could have been made and what we wished we had seen. So obviously the Paris game, all the Olympics, they have a huge budget to organize everything. And what was new with the Paris Olympics where was the will of the French Olympic Committee and of the city of Paris to open the games, as they said, and to organize them directly in the city rather than in a stadium, which is very interesting. And it should have been an opportunity to imagine a new scenario in which big sport events are no longer the source of worries regarding trafficking and other, social negative consequences, but a scenario in which the games can be a leverage for solution. Just one example. For example, some student dorms and, as I said, emergency hostels were emptied for the tourists, but also for the volunteers of the games, because the games rely a lot on volunteering work, actually, and also for the extra police forces coming to Paris to secure the game. And maybe new housing facilities could have been created, built in Paris or, in the close area. And those new facilities could have become new emergency shelters after the game, as a legacy of the game. But rather than that, the organization chose to use what already existed at the cost of the people who were living in them and who need them. So we have known for 10 years that the games will be in Paris. And well, I talk a lot about housing, but because this is very important for us. And over the last decade, we just saw less and less money being put into the state-funded emergency shelter system. 2 years ahead of the games, we at CCM, we tried to develop awareness raising and training programs because we had this idea of risks in mind. And we tried to enter in contact with the organization committee, for example, to do some sensitization work, awareness raising work with the volunteers. We did not get an answer. And we applied with a project on awareness raising and training to several funders from the state, and we also got no favorable answer. So I would also like to stress that the collective, the other side of the medal, has a page on its website. You can translate it with Google, I think, that is entitled Our Solutions, and it's all divided by topics. And there are some proposals from the collective on various topics, as I said. So I can name maybe 2 of them. So one of them was to mobilize a part of the games volunteers on missions related to the assistance of vulnerable people living near the Olympic sites. Well, of course, no, it was not accepted or used by the organization. And another one was to establish a direct communication line between the collective and indirectly its member and the Paris Police Central Office to report problematic situations, either caused by the police, either for people who might need the police, if we face a case of exploitation or violence, whichever. We did see some positive actions from the state. Well, it's not a lot, but still, I would like to stress it. It was mainly driven by the French national coordinator against trafficking, who used kind of the Olympics as a pretext to push for the training of magistrates on the topic of trafficking, which is something very hard to do in France, to have magistrates, judges, prosecutors sit down, take the time to go through an open training like this. So before the games, 2 days of training were organized in Paris and Marseille, where Olympic sites are located, and NGOs such as us were able to participate as guest speaker. So it is not a lot, and obviously a one-day training is not sufficient. We all know that not all the magistrates were there either, but still it's an effort that can be highlighted. If we talk about some kind of recommendation for future big sport events that are going to take place in the US or wherever, it is good to keep in mind that the Olympics can be used as a pretext for many, many things. And suddenly when you have the Olympics, everyone wants, you know, to fix its agenda around the Olympics. So, well, for us, it did not work a lot for what we offered, but it can be used as a way to push for some small changes. It's an accelerator in a kind of way. And then a final recommendation would be for the American organizations who will have to face the Olympics in Los Angeles to come together and to found a collective such as we did here, where we, the CCM, are not at the initiative of the other side of the medal, but we were so happy to join it, even if we don't really have the means to be very, very active, but still it is really a way to use our resources at the best we can as civil society organizations, because we know that we don't have a lot of resources, and to carry the voice of people who don't have a voice or who cannot be heard, who are not heard, who are not listened to by the state, by the public, by tourists, etc.
Thank you so much, Roxane. That's so detailed. I think it's great to hear the specific solutions and the encouragement for the US and for the future, and how we can actually be effective in what we do and how we work. And I can see already there's some really brilliant questions that have been posted in the chat, and there's a great QA function which just helps us keep track. So do post them there as well. Before we go to the questions, we're going to put this poll up again with for the second time, asking the same question that we asked before, to see whether just so far in hearing the panel speak, whether that's affected your opinion of whether sporting events inherently cause an increase in trafficking. And we'll share the results in the chat. But I do know that we've had there's a couple of questions that really directly relate, of course, to the points you just made, Roxane. And I know that I think both of you can speak to it. Jan, if you can hear me, I'm going to invite you to ask your question yourself that you've posted in the Q&A directly to the panelists. So if we can close the poll, and then Jan, if you could ask your question, that'd be wonderful. You will need to unmute though, yes. Jan. Yeah, you're here. Great.
I'm in the United States, and I have a couple of friends who work regarding the Super Bowl and sex trafficking. And I'm just wondering, from what I'm hearing, is the issue worse in the United States around the Super Bowl, World Series, some of the basketball events? Is it worse in the United States than in the rest of the world? Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. And I think, I created an organization that's US based and around the Super Bowl. So I think it's really good that you asked this question. And perhaps PG, I could turn to you first, because I know you've worked in the US, so you have some on the ground experience.
Yes, in terms of trafficking in the sex industry, no, it's not worse. It has actually happened already, that myths around an increase in prostitution generally, and in sex trafficking more in particularly during events in the US as well. They've been debunked already as well. It hasn't happened. It does not happen. It is not true that during sportive events, there is an increased demand for sexual services. And consequently, it is not true that there is an increase of offer of these services. And this really, I am happy to send you a bibliography of a number of studies that have been conducted all around the world in countries where trafficking in the sex industry and sex work are definitely not little numbers, including in the US, but also in Brazil, in South Africa, in Europe, in different countries. It's a myth. It's a myth. If you can send us the studies, yes, I can definitely send you a bibliography. I've got them all with pleasure. It's all a lot of them are peer reviewed even. It's methodologically sound studies. And what definitely I would warn in the US is to work together with organizations that work with sex workers and victims of trafficking. In the run-up for all those of you who are working around trafficking and around this big sportive event in the US, in Los Angeles, if there is people from Los Angeles, contact local sex worker organizations and work together with them in order to increase knowledge amongst the workers about what can be done, and do not believe in these myths, and do not act upon them, because what is acted upon these myths is only more repression. It's never going to help any victim of trafficking.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's really helpful, PD. And there is a related question as well that Pinky's asking on this similar theme. I think it would be important to hear Pinky ask. You just unmute yourself, Pinky. Just need to go to the unmute in the bottom by the microphone symbol on the bottom left of your screen. Okay, I will ask a question for, oh no, here you are, perfect. Please go ahead.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, would you like to read out your question?
Oh, yes. My name is Pinky Khwabani. I work in the area of human trafficking for sexual exploitation in South Africa. And as you know, South Africa is a destination and exit, preferred destination and exit point for traffickers. It's largely because of the law enforcement working with traffickers. So there's a lot of corruption and it's easier to exploit the system. But in our work, we also know that we've known that France has abolished prostitution. And I wanted to get a sense of this because as I heard from one of the panelists, there seems to be a lot of it going on still. So I wanted a little bit of clarity on that. And the other issue you raised was law enforcement. You expected law enforcement to work with you guys on the ground as NGOs, and I wondered why you would think they would do that if prostitution is unlawful, so to speak, which you will clarify, and why they would work with and protecting the people on the ground if it's unlawful. I hope you understand what I'm saying. And that's it.
May I answer or yeah. Okay, I'm going to clarify what is the legal model in France. And I'm sorry, I should have probably done it in advance. You tend to assume that everybody knows things when you're deep into them. So France has adopted a law to end demand of sex work in April 2016. It has by no means abolished prostitution. It is a so-called neo-abolitionist law. And the aim of this law is to shift criminalization from the sex worker, from the people selling sex or sexual services rather, to the clients of sex workers. So in addition to criminalizing every person who takes profit out of prostitution, which goes from the classic pimp all the way to the landlord, to a son who is going to university with her sex worker mother's money. Like, it's very large. To the sex workers who are working together with another sex worker, because working together makes them the pimp of each other automatically, because they profit from the fact that the other one is working to get more clients. So it's very large. And this law of 2016 added the clients. The clients are now criminalized for buying sexual services, whereas in theory, sex workers are not criminalized. Unfortunately, this law has been promoted as feminist, but the overwhelming evidence in every country that this law has been introduced is that there is an increase of violence, that the health of sex workers, the access to health goes down, that there is sex work is pushed into the underground, and there is more exploitation. And a short answer to explain why this is, it's that they are making everything around sex work illegal. Sex workers are still, even if they're supposedly victims, they do not qualify for real victim status. They do not get any actual help. And even if they enter some sort of exiting programs, they get a very, very little amount of money a month, like what they would probably earn with two clients to compare. So it's like it would be around maybe $400 a month, which in Paris, for instance, it's nothing. So there is very few people who claim this to exit prostitution. There is an increase of sex workers, of offer, not of demand, since this law, also because of the COVID situation, the COVID crisis. The numbers of sex workers, we have been seeing and documenting that by going through websites and checking the numbers of ads, etc. It has been going up, whereas the number of clients, safer clients, let's call them, has been going down because they have been criminalized. And the clients who are taking a risk are demanding sex workers to actually come down to their terms. So sex workers have got less negotiation power because of this law, and they are more inclined to take whichever client comes, because the clients available are less and there is more workers, and nothing has been done. And Roxane was talking about the fact that when we talk about trafficking and slavery and what exploitation generally, we have to look at the structural causes, and we have to tackle those, not just say, oh yes, there is a sportive event, trafficking is gonna boom. What's bringing trafficking is the need for people for a better life, the need for people to eat, to pay their bills, and the lack of opportunities, especially for migrants who without papers, but not just. The lack of opportunities, less opportunities for gender minorities, for women, for trans people. These are the conditions that have to change if your aim, like the aim of the French law, is to end all prostitution, and by doing that by tackling demand, by criminalizing clients, it's never going to happen. If we look at the numbers that we have, I think that maybe if no sex workers start sex work from now on, in France, prostitution would be abolished by 2500. We've done the calculation. It's a law that makes France look good. It gives an impression of being a good country that wants to protect women, but in reality puts people who are into sex work by circumstances, by lack of opportunity, or by exploitation even, in much worse conditions, including those who may do it by their own decision. But it's definitely a model that has been proven, and I've done research comparing US, France, Australia, and New Zealand in terms of trafficking, migration, in the sex trafficking, and the law. And France had one of the worst outcomes because of this law in terms of access to justice, in terms of protection of rights. So I don't know if I've answered the question.
I think so. I think you've given a lot of context.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Pinky. You've given a lot of context to, I think.
Yes, thank you. If you could, is it possible to get that the research that you've just spoken about? Yeah.
It's
Great.
linked on the Freedom United website. It's called Sex.
We'll include it.
Great.
We'll include it as well in the email that we'll send out afterwards. So thanks for the prompt.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And yeah, you'll find it on the website. We have an anonymous attendee who's asked a question. I'm not sure if they would like to answer the question themselves or remain anonymous by voice as well. If you would like to ask a question, otherwise I'll ask it for you, because I want to present. It's about NGOs and how they work, and I think it's really important to hear from, if we'll hear from Roxane in particular about this collaboration, because she talked about it when she presented the work that they're doing in the coalition with the other side of the medal. Susanna, is it your question about effective law enforcement strategies? Thank you.
Hi there. My question was about the familiar effective law enforcement strategies involving collaborating with non-government organizations and local communities to prevent trafficking, because I working for NGO, and what I find is really hard unless you are a big, powerful international organization to get really practical conversation with the law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for asking a question. Oh yeah, Roxane, I do think collaboration is often a challenge. What could you share about it when it comes to answering this question and addressing trafficking?
Well, we do have several examples of working with the law enforcement. If I'm only talking about us and mainly the Paris region, we have a very good partnership with the labor inspection. So you will see that on the topic of sexual exploitation, the law that was adopted in 2016 is very controversial and does not seem to bring any positive outcome for the protection of persons. But at the same time, a law regarding labor inspection was adopted, and it actually gives the power of identifying victims to labor inspectors. So concretely, it means that any labor inspectors in France can themselves trigger an investigation on the basis of human trafficking for labor exploitation. Before that, they would have to send a letter to the prosecutor. The prosecutor would have to make up his mind to prosecute or not. Now the investigation is automatically open, and the labor inspectors have extensive competence to lead the investigation. And this has really changed the way we would work with the inspection. because of this law, we decided with them to develop a training program. So now every new promotion of the labor inspectorate in France has a training on human trafficking for labor exploitation, in which we participate, the police participate, and of course the labor inspection. And we really work close together. So in each region there is a focal point for human trafficking, because the labor inspections, they don't only work on human trafficking, but those focal points, they know the offense, the criminal offense, they know specialized actors such as us. And so we are able to, to directly talk to them when we have, when we need it, and they know where to find us. So this is a really good example. And since this new competence of the labor inspectors, the numbers of cases for labor exploitation really increased in France, which is a good thing, because, well, it's a good thing when there are no cases, because it can mean that, well, there is no exploitation, but it may also it can also mean, that we just don't see it, and that we don't know how to bring the victims to trust the authorities. And a good thing with the labor inspection is that they are not the police. So until they trigger this particular competence that they have, and that they trigger the investigation, they have no obligation to report the situation. Even better than that, they have an obligation to keep it a secret, because it's made to protect the workers from harassment, for example, in big firms, etc. So they work in very, very close confidentiality. Also, they do not wear uniforms, whereas the police does. So when they enter a restaurant, I don't know, a building site, people are less afraid of them. They don't identify them as the police, and they don't necessarily run away. So we work really good with them. And this last year, we even managed to start building some kind of a protocol between the housing system I was talking about, us, and the labor inspection. It's very off at the moment. I mean, it's informal at the moment. But we hope that it will get more structured, and that we can help the victims leave exploitation, so that they can denounce what they lived, because until they have a new accommodation, they will stay where they are exploited. Yeah, this is only one example. Of course, even when they are, how do you say, protocols that are decided and settled, it does not automatically work. It relies a lot on individuals. But if you are interested in good practices, maybe you can check what is happening in Belgium, which is often quoted as a country where the civil society and the authorities really work hand in hand. And maybe they have one of the most protective systems in Europe for victims of trafficking, whichever the form of exploitation.
Well, that's great. It's great to hear a positive example and to know where we can look for how a strong, resilient civil society and collaboration can have an impact. Thank you very much for your answer. In fact, we're almost at the end of the hour. I know we didn't manage to answer all the questions. My apologies for that, but I think we got to some real depth of the topic on that. So I just wanted to say from myself, thank you to you both, Roxane and PG, and I'm going to hand to Ellie to close our conversation today.
Thanks, Joanna, and thank you, PG and Roxane, for your amazing contributions to this difficult and complex topic. Your insights are greatly appreciated. Thank you to all the participants and the team here at Freedom United for making this event happen. We will be sharing the recording of this webinar tomorrow, and that will include further readings on the issues, should you like to continue this conversation. Again, thank you all for joining us today, and we are so grateful to the Freedom United community. finally, if you can make a small donation, we love holding these events, and your support enables us to do the work that we do. And if you have any further future ideas for topics, please don't hesitate to reach out. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and we will see you all next time.